Paris et Bordeaux.
Seymour Fickner's rest d'arbor. Het gaat diep. Die Polaris komt af.
Some moments in history can change everything. Moments that flare brightly, then leave long shadows. A confrontation turns into a justification. A tragedy becomes a tool. A lie gains traction. These are the flashpoints where official stories can outpace the truth, where narrative wins over nuance, and by the time facts emerge, the consequences are already in motion. Because what matters often isn't what happened, it's who gets to tell the story. In Season 2 of Andor, the Ghorman crisis doesn't begin with blasters. The Empire wants control of resources, and it begins by controlling the story.
We need what's in the ground. The Empire has been patient long enough.
It plants agents, shapes public opinion, and frames the story before the conflict begins.
Local insurgents spread rumours through the night and have organised this highly volatile insurrection you see behind me now.
Before a blaster is fired, the justification is ready.
Our struggles with Ghorman are well documented at this point.
Science fiction, even at its most fantastical, is often grounded in the fears, hopes, and power struggles of the world it was created in.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s against the man kind of thing, nested deep inside a fantasy.
Or a colonial, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
While Andor doesn't reenact history and doesn't claim to, in it we can catch glimpses of our own.
We leave from Ghorman again this morning.
We're in complete blockade of material systems until the incident can be fully explained and the terrorists have been brought to justice.
Andor shows us that propaganda isn't just shouted from podiums. It can go unnoticed in the background of our daily lives, in a language we start using without thinking.
This mockery of Emperor Palpatine. You must have seen him. How could you not? Scandalous.
It's propaganda. Mother, you're being sold these ideas.
My poor boy. Your gullibility is breathtaking.
Done with local rumors. The only story that matters is Ghorman aggression.
The threats. The inexplicable resistance to imperial norms.
Inexplicable Ghorman resistance to imperial norms. Many people, even some Ghormans, have already been asking how long the Empire's patience can be tested.
The language moves seamlessly and almost word for word, from the Empire's internal strategy room to a news anchor. This messaging then becomes internalized by people galaxy-wide. While Cyril is on the ground in Ghorman and sees a different story, his mother Edie is drawn in by the Empire's narrative.
I mean, you won't be visiting.
They won't get another credit of mine. I'm not buying Ghorman again. I'm sick of it. They were always too good for the rest of us.
You are watching too much Imperial news.
My opinions were well established before you relocated.
Edie doesn't question the news, she absorbs it, and her empathy for the Ghorman fades. Cyril, on the other hand, appears torn between the career he wants within the Empire and the reality he's starting to witness up close.
I'm in charge here, Mother.
The loyalty of characters like Cyril and Dedra isn't enforced, it's cultivated, slowly, through family pressure, ambition, and the aching desire to matter. Cyril wants to matter, to belong, but the version of him that seems to matter most to the Empire and to his mother is the one that disappears into the crowd.
This place is hardly a threat to the Empire.
Don't become too much of an individual, Cyril.
You need a radical insurgency you can count on. You need Ghorman rebels you can depend on to do the wrong thing.
Dedra doesn't wait for open rebellion. She shapes it, orchestrates it.
There's an ISB field agent on site. They believe a rebel attack is imminent. There's been a rapid increase in local activity.
And the shipments are running smoothly.
Yes, sir.
History shows us how real-world regimes have used similar tactics, provoking unrest to validate repression. During the apartheid era, South Africa's security branch employed strategic provocation as part of a broader system of psychological and political control. Intelligence units infiltrated activist circles, not merely to monitor, but to shape. Operatives were deployed to incite chaos, undermine leadership, and provoke violence from within. By fueling instability, the state could fracture movements, discredit legitimate resistance, and justify crackdowns under the banner of law and order. This strategy was documented by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, authorised by Nelson Mandela and chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
When you are subjected to treatment that begins to work in here, and you begin to say, hey, maybe they are right. Language does not just describe reality. Language creates the reality it describes.
In its final report, the Commission documented how covert units conducted disinformation campaigns, engaged in sabotage, and orchestrated violent acts to discredit opponents of apartheid. Stories were planted, activists were painted as extremists. Public fear was deliberately stoked. The aim wasn't just to contain dissent, it was to control the story. In Andor, we watched Dedra manipulate the Ghorman insurgents into a doomed operation. She isn't preventing violence, she's manufacturing the justification for it. In the 1960s, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover targeted the civil rights and anti-war movements with covert operations, including targeting civil rights leader Martin Luther King.
The FBI's current information on Martin Luther King.
My information can be summed up in a few words. King is a political and moral degenerate.
The program was focused not just on surveillance, but on disruption. The FBI infiltrated civil rights groups, spread false stories, forged letters to provoke infighting, and deliberately portrayed non-violent activists as dangerous subversives to destroy their public credibility.
We plant stories with them to ensure that the activities of suspected radicals see the light of day.
We'll trace it.
Only if it's true. See, it's called counterintelligence, Clyde. The more untrue the story, the more dramatic the impact.
By manufacturing disorder, authorities could justify a crackdown. In both cases, those in power weren't just responding to unrest, they were shaping it. Violence, once provoked, becomes the justification for violence in return. And the first story told, of chaos, of threat, of dangerous others, is often the one that sticks.
Prends Gaston et va jeter l'âme couverte. What's in our ground? What is it you've been sent to steal from us?
The Empire's interest in Ghorman centers on Kalkite, a volatile and rare mineral needed to generate energy, the kind of substance that an empire builds strategy around.
Access to stable, unlimited power will transform the galactic economy and solidify imperial authority.
This scene draws parallels to the Wannsee Conference, a 1942 meeting where senior Nazi officials met to formalize the logistics of genocide through bureaucratic language and cold precision. Here too, cold logistics disguise violent ends.
Haben wir noch rund 130.000 deutsche Juden. Zahlenmäßig überschaubar, politisch kompliziert. Wir sprachen darüber. Die größten Posten? Generalgouverneur.
800,000 Ghormans. Relocation would be ideal, but we need to plan for alternatives, all of which will require preparation.
The Empire's pursuit of Kalkite and Ghorman isn't just clever world building. It reflects a pattern we've seen in real life. In 1951, Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh moved to nationalize Iran's oil, breaking from British control. At home, he was celebrated. Abroad, he was a threat.
Cheap oil from Iran helped put Britain on four wheels.
The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was Britain's most profitable overseas investment.
Newsreels reflected British interests. The loss of Abadan would mean losing not just cheap oil and profits, but putting at risk an international cartel in which the major oil companies controlled the market and fixed the price.
In 1953, Operation Ajax was launched, a covert coup to remove Mossadegh and restore the Shah.
Britain and America had orchestrated the downfall of Iran's only democratic leader, a man of principle whom in other places Britain might well have welcomed as the successor to empire.
But it didn't start with violence. It started with theatre.
That mob that came into North Tehran and was decisive in the overthrow was a mercenary mob, had no ideology, and that mob was paid for by American dollars.
In March 1953, with Britain's agents fanning the flames, a hired mob called for Mossadegh's blood.
American journalist Stephen Kinzer talks about the critical role CIA agent Kermit Roosevelt played in this.
Kermit Roosevelt was able immediately to change the public tenor and view of Mossadegh. He bribed newspaper editors and reporters to the point where he had 80% of the Iranian press in his payroll.
And in Ghorman, we can see a similar pattern. A valuable resource beneath the surface, a crackdown above, and a ready-made justification. Other real-world parallels are close at hand. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is home to extraordinary wealth, and yet the country remains entangled in conflict and exploitation.
History has been cruel to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, exploited by the early European explorers, by Belgium and its cruel king, and then through the last 6 decades of greedy Congolese leadership and war.
In 1960, Congo's first elected Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, called for greater independence.
Indépendance de l'unité africaine. Vive le Congo indépendant et souverain.
Months later, he was ousted, imprisoned, and eventually killed, with the covert support of Western forces. Disinformation painted him as a threat to Western interests long before the bullets were fired.
King Baudouin was displeased with Lumumba's speech, and it marked a turning point that sealed Lumumba's fate.
Lumumba's wish to control Congo's own resources was seen as a threat. And in Andor, we see a similar trap. A planet stripped for its wealth, a people made to pay for it, and a story carefully told to justify it all.
Proceed.
Fire at will. Repeat. Fire at will.
Get him out of here! Open fire!
The Ghorman protest becomes a massacre not by accident, but by design. The first shot isn't fired by the rebels. It comes from above, by imperial order. And the story that follows, the narrative of rebellion of necessary force, has already been written. In 1919, in colonial India, a gathering at Amritsar followed days of rising tension. Thousands gathered at Jallianwala Bagh to protest repressive laws and to mark the Baisakhi festival. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer, citing fears of insurrection after recent unrest, arrived with soldiers with the goal of restoring order. Without warning, he ordered fire.
Should we issue a warning, sir?
They've had their warning. No meetings.
For 10 minutes, soldiers shot into the unarmed crowd.
My intention was to inflict a lesson that would have an impact throughout all India.
They're outside a police station in protest against new laws requiring every African to carry a pass at all times.
40 years later, in Sharpeville, South Africa, another protest turned deadly. Black South Africans marched against apartheid pass laws. Police opened fire on the unarmed crowd. Many were shot in the back while fleeing. Many of the officers sent into Sharpeville were young, inexperienced, and poorly trained in crowd control. In Andor, the Empire makes a similar, calculated choice, sending green riot troops, soldiers likely to panic.
They look like children.
What? They're green, sir. They're useless.
I see Imperial uniforms, Sergeant.
In 1972, Northern Ireland bore witness to its own tragedy in Bloody Sunday.
If they fire on us, we're going to fire back, and they know that perfectly well.
I mean, do you think the operation was justified?
Of course.
A civil rights march against internment ends in bloodshed. British soldiers open fire. 14 unarmed civilians are killed. The British Army's immediate response? The Army fired in self-defense.
My understanding is absolutely clear that the Paras were fired on and returned fire.
Were
Both
any
high-velocity and low-velocity bullets were used.
Were any soldiers hit?
Not to my knowledge.
This is Ghorman reaching for any open channel that can hear me. We're being slaughtered. The imperial murder of Ghorman has begun. There are hundreds of bodies this moment. As I say these words, hundreds of murdered Ghorman lay dead in Vamo Plaza.
Before the ashes are settled, an official version of events is taking shape in the Senate.
As the full measure of Ghorman perfidy comes into focus.
Raising the alarm about Ghorman long ago. The only surprise about yesterday's insurgency was the savagery of the Ghorman attack.
Only Mon Mothma deviates from the Empire's version of events.
The distance between what is said
Shut it down.
and what is known to be true has become an abyss.
While Andor doesn't recreate our history, it does show us some patterns. How violence can be framed as necessary, how protesters can be cast as aggressors, and how language, carefully chosen, can lay the groundwork for brutality long before a shot is fired. After the Sharpeville massacre, Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd praised the police for acting in a courageous and efficient manner, and later falsely insisted that the demonstrators had shot first. "I don't know how many we shot," said Colonel PNR, the local police commander. It all started when hordes of natives surrounded the police station. My car was struck by a stone. If they do these things, they must learn their lesson the hard way.
In the aftermath of the Amritsar massacre, General Reginald Dyer described the gathering at Jallianwala Bagh as a direct threat to British authority. Amritsar was, in fact, the storm centre of a rebellion. The whole Punjab had its eyes on Amritsar, and the assembly of the crowd that afternoon was for all practical purposes a declaration of war. But when questioned by the Hunter Committee, Dyer offered a different perspective, one that suggests a different motivation. I think it quite possible that I could have dispersed the crowd without firing, but they would have come back again and laughed, and I would have made what I consider a fool of myself.
While some sections of the British establishment, like Winston Churchill, then Defence Secretary, condemned his actions, the House of Lords praised Dyer, gifting him a sword inscribed with the motto, Saviour of the Punjab, reinforcing the narrative that the massacre was a regrettable but necessary act of empire.
The day after Bloody Sunday in British Parliament, Home Secretary Reginald Maudling laid blame on the marchers, stating that troublemakers had attacked the British Army. The Army returned the fire directed at them with aimed shots and inflicted a number of casualties on those who were attacking them. The Widgery Tribunal largely echoed this framing, stating that there was no reason to suppose soldiers would have fired without provocation, but it lacked evidence. Critics called it a whitewash. Only in 2010, over 30 years later, did the Saville inquiry correct the record.
What happened on Bloody Sunday was both unjustified and unjustifiable. It was wrong.
In these cases, the truth was delayed, distorted, or denied. In Andor, the Ghorman massacre is immediately reframed by the Empire. In the Senate, Mon Mothma speaks up.
What happened yesterday on Ghorman was unprovoked genocide. Yes, genocide.
But the room recoils as she strays from the Empire's narrative. The Empire is already mining Kalkite from Ghorman. The massacre wasn't just rationalised, it was monetised. While the Senate debated what to call it, the Empire quietly moved in. The Kalkite under Ghorman was too valuable to leave untouched. Tragedy created opportunity, and the mining began before the morning ended. In history, there have been many moments when uncertainty has turned into momentum.
In 1964, two naval confrontations between US forces and North Vietnamese forces in the Gulf of Tonkin were used to secure sweeping authority for war in Vietnam.
The second reported attack was unverified and even doubted by those on the scene.
You're pretty sure there was a torpedo attack?
Oh, no doubt about that, I think.
Events afterwards showed that our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong. It didn't happen.
But the story was pushed forward with shaky evidence, with the government still seeking verification when President Johnson addressed the public.
Repeated acts of violence against the armed forces of the United States must be met not only with alert defense, but with positive reply.
As a result, Congress passed a resolution granting broad war powers without a formal declaration. Public and congressional support was built on shaky ground, and by the time doubt caught up, the war was well underway.
As the truth surfaced, and with it, the revelation that facts were bent to fit policy, public trust collapsed, and anti-war movements grew.
But, for years, the official story held sway.
Don't put on the Imperial News.
I've seen it, it's insane.
The winner writes the story.
Well, they haven't won yet.
In 1933, the Reichstag, home of the German parliament, burned.
While the fire was real, its aftermath became a political weapon. Nazi leaders moved quickly, using the crisis to suspend civil liberties, arrest political enemies, and consolidate power.
And he said, I do hope to God that this, as I believe, is the work of the communists. This will give us the chance that we need.
The Reichstag fire became a turning point. It didn't just destroy a building, it helped clear the path for dictatorship. In Andor, the massacre at Ghorman serves a similar purpose. The rebellion is blamed, and the violence is repackaged, and by the time the public asks questions, the answers have already been suggested.
Questions are being asked about how an insurrection of this scale could be mounted without the aid and support of outside rebel assistance.
The Empire built this fire. They made this fire and led us to the slaughter. Now they expect us to die without knowing why. Help us! Is there no one who can help us?
Andor reminds us what happens when the story is decided before the facts are known. Stories like this have a long memory, and unless we question them, we risk repeating them.
Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
Science fiction creates space for this kind of reflection. It offers distance, but also clarity. It lets us see ourselves more clearly through imagined worlds.
We never learned, from England or Rome or, a dozen other empires that went on for hundreds of years or sometimes thousands of years. We never got it. We never said, well, wait, this isn't the right thing to do. And we're still struggling with it.
Andor humanizes everyone in its story, from rebels to loyalists, reminding us that behind every act of resistance or complicity, there is a person,
shaped by fear, loyalty, desperation, or hope.
I hope things work out for you.
Rebellions are built on hope.